Concerns that the draft amendments to the Black Economic Empowerment Codes released by the Department of Trade and Industry may hurt the wider transformative process. The DTI released the latest round of amendments last week for public comment. At the centre of the debate is how black ownership constructively contributes to transformation. Well, Amber von Steiger is a BEE specialist with Norton Rose Fulbright. She joins us now to unpack this. Amber, thanks indeed for coming in.
Of course.
Perhaps let's just start with what exactly constitutes black ownership for the purposes of BEE, because therein lies the grey area, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and that understanding of what ownership is for BEE purposes is really the key factor that we need to take into account when we're saying statements like ownership counteracts transformation.
Yeah.
For the purposes of BEE, it's a very limited scope of what constitutes ownership, and it's really just measuring two factors. The first being voting rights, and the second being the right to economic interest, which is really a right similar to dividends. It's only those two factors that constitute ownership. So for BEE purposes, ownership is much more limited than a layperson's understanding would be.
And part of your problem with some of these amendments is the fact that when you take that definition into account, you might have entities within this space that would sort of give up on their BEE initiatives just to sort of trace over or reach out for that ownership number, the 51% ownership, and therein lies the bit of confusion.
Absolutely. So one of the amendments that's been proposed in the draft legislation is that your large enterprise, which previously had to comply with all of the elements of BEE, may now be entitled to automatic BEE levels if they have at least 51% black ownership. The result of this would obviously be that there's a huge drive for business, instead of implementing a number of transformation initiatives, focusing only on the black ownership.
Could we see sort of this re-emergence, if it's not there already, of fronting? Because a couple of years ago, you had this concern big on the agenda. But surely when this sort of thing happens, it creates a space for fronting to even occur at a probably higher frequency, I would think.
Absolutely. I mean, it would need to understand what fronting is. It really is the element of it being misrepresentation of a true set of facts.
Yeah.
What the legislation is allowing, however, is to have a representation to the public of a company that's much more transformed than what it really is. Unfortunately, the legislation is permitting that instead of creating a space where true transformation from employment to skills development to management should be the drivers going forward.
And that is why I would imagine that the understanding of structures of a company, especially companies that are involved in this, that's pivotal to understand before they comment, because invariably it affects them.
Absolutely. From an ownership perspective, from looking at what their procurement strategies are for their own internal purposes of how they would like to advertise themselves to their own customers, these are really the key drivers on that. And a lot of the procurement changes in the draft legislation are putting forward or prioritizing 51% black ownership over, for example, your small and your medium-sized companies, even if they don't have that 51% black ownership.
So it's public comment time for
Correct.
this latest round. I mean, what do you think should essentially be in this comment section?
Even on the first draft set that came through in March, and that was the set of legislation that promoted the automatic level for large enterprises, there's been a huge industry pushback against this, and it's really been from the fact that industry is pushing back, saying the transformative legislation that's meant to correct historical issues that we've had is actually going against transformation, that where it's being driven is not truly transformative in its nature.
Yeah. But I want to simply try and get out of you what do you think would sort of make up the essential part of this drive back against some of these policies? I mean, obviously ownership takes center stage here on this. What do you think will make up most of the company's debate around this, or arguments?
Most of the debate will really be to try and focus on the remaining elements of the BEE scorecard, and that's going to be the focus. And I think that's where companies are looking to transform from the ground up all the way through to management and ultimately through to ownership. The argument of why it's not transformative is because of the limited scope of what ownership is for BEE. One of the alternative proposals that people have been considering is for companies to qualify for automatic BEE levels. the definition of ownership they need to comply with will be a different definition and broader than what it currently is.
Amber, thanks very much indeed for that insight. That was BEE specialist at Norton Rose Fulbright, Amber von Steiger.